Hello people, hey, hello, hi everyone, and hello to Jason Isaacs. I thought I'd come back with a new series of videos on conservatism and ideologies generally, starting with a more general picture on ideology, specifically, as it says there, what is an ideology and what is it for? Now, you could go online and you could find an answer to this, and that would be lovely, so by all means do so. But what I'm going to do is, again, try to come at it from a slightly different direction, one that perhaps might be a little more helpful as you're thinking about how you organize your ideas about ideologies. So let's crack on with that with no further ado. So, what is an ideology and what is it for? Let's start off with the simple state that we have the current civil state, we have the current shape of society, and we can probably agree that for whatever reason that is suboptimal. There are things in this society that we don't like, and that we think could be going better. We can then say, well, okay, there are certain things that we can do that will improve that society, that will help it on its way to becoming a better place, to a more perfect, if you will, a more perfect society. And ultimately, through enough of those situations, we may indeed come to a situation which is optimal, essentially when the game finishes. Now, most ideologies will fit into this general model. Interestingly, there's one that doesn't subscribe to this optimal situation. Think about it this way. If you're liberal, when does the game end? Well, the game ends presumably when everybody is free. Although, of course, we then have to define what free means and what parameters that is that operates in. Similarly, if you're a socialist, you might say that the game ends when everybody's equal. But again, what does equal mean? It doesn't quite get that. It's not that easy when you start peeling back into it. But when does the game end for a conservative? The answer is the game never ends, because that's the nature of the conservative model. But I'm somewhat getting ahead of myself. The idea is that if we're all in the same ideology, then we can look at this and we can say, yes, there are certain things that are wrong. We agree with what the problems are. We agree with what we should prioritize in order to correct them. And then we can agree on how we might go about doing that. And again, ultimately agree on how we get to that optimal state. Or in other words, something like this. I'll get my picture out of the way there. So, what is an ideology for? Well, we look at the civil society, the civil state as it is now, and we agree there are problems here. There's a specific set of problems, and the most pressing ones are this, this, and this. And if we're all on the same ideology, then obviously we're going to agree. If somebody on a different ideology, they're going to disagree, and that's the nature of an ideology. Similarly, if we're all of the same ideological stripe, then we're going to agree as to how we're going to set about correcting these things. Now, again, within an ideology, there are going to be differences, but the general sweep of things, if we're all on the same ideology, then we're going to agree in the main as to the means by which we're going to go about correcting whatever problems we've identified. And then that agreed set of affairs that we're aiming towards. We're aiming towards a specific set of goals, where everybody's free, or where everybody's equal, or when we've dismantled the patriarchy, or when we've abolished the state, or whatever it is that we're choosing to do with our ideology. If we are on the same ideology, then we should have broadly agreeing or broadly compatible answers to all of these three terms, if we're in that same ideology. So what are the problems, how are we going to fix it, and what are we aiming towards? That's really, I think, what an ideology is for. Let's have a look at an example, shall we? Let's have a look at an example. So we're going to have this one here. We're going to have a look at income inequality. Now, quite clearly here, there is a problem. And if you ask a socialist, what's the problem here? Well, quite clearly, it's profoundly unfair. We've got some people who are benefiting massively from this particular system, and others who are suffering terribly. And again, if you're a radical socialist, if you're a revolutionary socialist, a communist, then what you're going to do is you're going to say, well, we're going to take everything off them. Hang on. We're going to take everything off them, and we're all basically going to meet in the middle. And then there's going to be this intermediary stage where we have democratic socialism, sort of centralism, and the state manages everything before, bang, we've all been wheeled off our capital, and the state can wither away. And so we're left living in this blissful commune. So that's your radical or your revolutionary or your communist socialist. And again, massive simplification here. If this doesn't make sense, don't worry, it will do at some point in the future. But just by way of contrast, let's flick across and let's have a look at the same model through the matrix of democratic socialism and one nation conservatism. Now, again, here we have the same problem. Now, if you ask a democratic socialist, what's the problem here? Well, they're going to say it's unfair. And, that's perfectly reasonable. We've got some people who are very well off, some people who are staggeringly wealthy, and then some people who are just profoundly poor. And quite clearly, well, certainly according to your democratic socialist mantra, that is unfair. Some people are winning more from society than others. If you ask a conservative, on the other hand, what's the problem here? Well, they don't have a massive problem with that idea of a hierarchy. They don't have a massive idea with people being richer than other people, unless we're getting to a situation where that presents a problem for society. If this is actually going to deliver a problem to the integrity of society, if the income gap is going to be so great that it's going to challenge the ongoing existence of organic society, then One Nation Conservatives have got a problem and they have to act. And when we go on and we look at this, when we look at these individual ideologies in practice, we find that what they both did was essentially the same. They took some from the wealthy and they took some from the well-off and they gave it to the poorer. Now, the reasons why your democratic socialists did that and the reasons why your One Nationist conservatives did it were fundamentally different. One was about a principled response that nobody should be gaining more from society than anybody else, while the other one was a pragmatic response. That is, if we don't do something about this, then we're storing up massive problems for later. Either way, both ideologies looked at the problem, they identified what was wrong with it, they identified a means by which to achieve it, and they moved towards a better outcome, hopefully a more sustainable outcome. Again, if this doesn't make a huge amount of sense, don't worry. You're going through each of these ones individually in due course, and hopefully it will spin out. But before we finish with this, two more examples. So let's just look at this. So we're coming back to the same model now. We're going to look at the new right. Nothing's changed here. We've got the same three bands, and the new right comes in and says, well, okay, we can't try to engineer an outcome here because it's irreducibly complex. And we won't create the outcome that we want. It's going to go spectacularly wrong. And besides, what we're doing is we're rewarding failure. So what we're going to do instead is we're going to try to create a situation in which everybody can benefit. We're going to try to encourage economic growth. Because if we can encourage economic growth, then the poor will become poorer, the well-off will become better off, and the wealthy will become even wealthier. And that's fair because they're all working incredibly hard. If everybody's working harder, then obviously everyone's getting better, everyone's getting wealthier. The whole of this, the whole sum of this is much, much greater than the whole sum of that. So society is working in that everybody's getting better off. As for these lot here, well, that's tough, but clearly they're just not working hard enough. And again, that's really important because we come back to that right now, actually, because this is the same model that Tony Blair embraced when he embarked upon New Labour. However, obviously, he had to try to differentiate himself from Thatcher. Again, we're just looking here at income inequality. We're not bothered about that because a rising tide lifts all boats. But now let's come across here and look at this. Now, Blair looked at this problem and said, okay, we do have an issue in that these guys here, it doesn't matter how hard they work, they can't get across this breadline. They can't get across this breadline. So we need to change something. We need a structural change to address a structural problem. And he came up with the idea of social justice, rather confusingly, package of economic problems, but let's worry about that another time. So the idea here now is these guys here have achieved a means by which they can escape the poverty trap, and now they've got capital, and now they can join in the great roundabout of capitalism. They can become contributing members of a capitalist society, and in that you've got unity. If everybody's a good little capitalist, then everybody's working hard and we're all going fine. Now, what we've got there are people looking at a particular set of problems, identifying what the issue is, disagreeing about what the specific issue is, but anyway, so within their little cabals, agreeing on a particular issue, working out how they're going to address it, and then moving towards a particular end game. So identify the problem, identify the means by which you're going to fix it, and move towards some sort of preferential optimal end state. That's really what ideologies are all about. Identify the problem, sort out how you're going to identify the fix, and then what are you aiming towards? That's really your ideologies. Right, I'm going to stop at this point, okay, because that's a nice little 10-minute introduction to ideologies. Any questions you've got, give me a shout. The ones that I'm going to be looking at are conservatism, socialism, feminism, and I've got some out there on ecologism as well. So any of those problems, any of those ideologies, they're all out there. There's playlists for them all. At least there will be a conservative one by the time I finish my work this evening. And I'm going to bow out at that point. Thank you very much. I look forward to your questions in the fullness of time. Take care now and enjoy your politics.